I still remember the sound of that leather chair creaking as I sat down in the lawyer's office. It was a cold Tuesday morning in November, and the room smelled like old books and expensive cologne. My hands were trembling, not from grief, though Lord knows I had plenty of that, but from something else entirely, something that had been building inside me for months, maybe even years. My husband, Robert, had been gone for 3 weeks. 3 weeks since I held his hand as he took his last breath. 3 weeks since I whispered I love you one final time. And there I was, surrounded by people who claimed to love him too, but whose eyes were fixed on that manila envelope in the lawyer's hands like vultures circling roadkill. To my left sat my oldest son, David, in his expensive suit that Robert had paid for. His wife, Jennifer, was beside him, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on the armrest. On my right was my daughter, Susan, who I hadn't heard from in 6 months until Robert's obituary ran in the paper. Then suddenly, she remembered she had a mother. Funny how death brings people together, isn't it? My younger son, Michael, sat in the back row with his family. He was the only one who looked genuinely sad, whose eyes were red from actual tears, not from staying up late calculating inheritance figures. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, cleared his throat. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen too many families tear themselves apart over money. "Shall we begin?" he asked, looking at me with what I can only describe as sympathy. "Yes," I said softly. "Let's get this over with." What happened in the next 30 minutes would change everything. What I did, what I had planned so carefully with Robert in those final months, would shock them all. But they had no idea. None of them knew that Robert and I had seen through every fake smile, every suddenly attentive visit, every, "How are you feeling, Dad?" That really meant, "When are you going to die so I can have your money?" At my age, I'm 87 years old now, you learn that people show you who they really are when they think there's something to gain. And my children, God bless them, had shown me exactly who they were. Mr. Harrison opened the envelope. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that thick carpet. Everyone leaned forward, even Susan, who was pretending to dab her eyes with a tissue. "This is the last will and testament of Robert James Morrison," Mr. Harrison began. And that's when I stood up. "Before you continue," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks, "there's something I need to do first." Jennifer rolled her eyes. David shifted uncomfortably. Susan looked annoyed. But Mr. Harrison smiled. He knew what was coming. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small stack of papers tied with a red ribbon. Papers that would change everything. Papers that held secrets, truths, and decisions that had been 47 years in the making. "What's that, Mother?" David asked, his voice tight with barely concealed impatience. I looked at each of them, these people I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, and I felt something inside me settle, a kind of peace. "This," I said, holding up those papers, "is the truth. And before we hear what your father left you, I think it's time you all heard it." The lawyer nodded. He'd been instructed by Robert himself to let me have this moment of clarity, this moment of justice. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Robert and I had been planning this for 6 months, every detail, every revelation, every consequence, and I was about to turn their world upside down. Let me take you back, because you need to understand how we got here. You need to know about the family I raised and the man I loved for 47 beautiful, complicated, heartbreaking years. I met Robert when I was 38 years old. I know what you're thinking. That's late, isn't it? Well, I'd been married before, to a man who left me with 2 small children and a mountain of debt. David was 6 and Susan was 4 when their father walked out. Just packed a bag one Tuesday and never came back. No note, no explanation, just gone. I raised those kids by myself for 9 years. 9 years of working double shifts at the hospital as a nurse, of missing school plays because I had to pay the rent, of crying in the shower so they wouldn't hear. I gave them everything I had, every ounce of love and energy and hope I possessed. Then I met Robert at a church picnic. He was a widower with a 10-year-old son named Michael. Robert's first wife had died of cancer 3 years earlier, and he was trying his best to be both mother and father to that sweet boy. We were 2 broken people trying to put our lives back together, and somehow we found each other. Robert was gentle. He was kind. He had worked his way up from nothing to own a small construction company, and he was generous to a fault. When we got married 6 months later, he didn't just marry me. He adopted David and Susan legally. He gave them his name. He treated them like his own blood. "They're my children now," he told me on our wedding night. "What's mine is theirs." And he meant it. He really did. For years, Robert poured everything into our family. He paid for David's college education, every single penny. When David wanted to go to law school, Robert took out a second mortgage on our house to make it happen. When Susan wanted to open a boutique, Robert gave her $50,000 as a loan that we all knew would never be repaid. And Michael, sweet Michael, he never asked for anything. He was happy with hand-me-downs and community college. He became a teacher, married a wonderful woman named Beth, and gave us 3 beautiful grandchildren who actually visited us on holidays, not just when they needed money. Robert built his construction company into something substantial. We weren't millionaires, but we were comfortable. We had a nice house, some savings, some investments. More importantly, we had each other. But here's what I learned over those 47 years. Not everyone values love the way they should. Not everyone sees family as something sacred. Some people see dollar signs where they should see heartbeats. I started noticing changes about 10 years ago. David stopped calling unless he needed advice about investments. Robert's investments, that is. He'd ask his father about stock portfolios and rental properties, always casual, always just curious. Jennifer, his wife, would make comments about our house. "This place must be worth a fortune now," she'd say, running her hand along our oak banister. "You should think about downsizing. All this space is wasted on 2 people." Susan was worse. She'd show up twice a year, Christmas and Robert's birthday, with expensive gifts we didn't need, financed by credit cards she couldn't afford. Then she'd drop hints about her cash flow problems or how her husband had been laid off again. Robert would write her a check. Every single time. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. "She's struggling," Robert would say. "She's using you," I'd reply. But he couldn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to. Parents never want to believe their children could be capable of such manipulation. The real wake-up call came 4 years ago when Robert had his first heart attack. He was 79 years old, and it was serious. We spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and the doctor said he needed to slow down, reduce stress, maybe sell the business. Within 24 hours of his heart attack, David showed up at the hospital with an estate planning attorney. Can you imagine? His father was lying there with tubes in his arms, barely conscious, and David wanted to talk about wills and trusts. I threw him out of that room so fast his head spun. Susan didn't even visit. She called once, asked if he was going to be okay, and then said, and I'll never forget this, "Does this mean he's going to have to stop helping me financially?" My heart broke that day. Not for Robert's health. I knew he'd recover. but for the realization that my children, the babies I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, saw their father as nothing more than a bank account. Only Michael came every day. He'd sit by Robert's bedside, reading him the newspaper, telling him stories about his kids, just being present. He never once asked about money or inheritance or what would happen to the business. That's when Robert and I had our first real conversation about what would come after, about what our death would mean for this family, about what we'd built and who deserved it. "They're going to fight over everything," Robert said one night, his voice weak but clear. "I can see it now. David and Susan are going to tear each other apart, and Michael's going to get caught in the middle." "Then we need a plan," I told him, squeezing his hand. "We need to be smart about this." And so we started planning, quietly, carefully, without telling anyone. We hired our own attorney, not the one David recommended, but someone we could trust. We talked about our values, about what we wanted our legacy to be, about how to protect the people who deserved protecting and teach lessons to those who needed teaching. Robert recovered from that heart attack, but he was never quite the same. His heart was weaker. He tired easily. We sold the construction business to his longtime partner for a fair price, and Robert started the slow process of retirement, and the vultures circled closer. David started visiting more often, always with questions about financial planning and maximizing estate value. Jennifer would bring articles about tax shelters and trust funds, leaving them on our coffee table like breadcrumbs. Susan's visits became business transactions. She'd stay for exactly 1 hour, ask for money, get uncomfortable when we talked about anything real, and leave. Her children, our grandchildren, we barely knew them. They were strangers with our last name. Meanwhile, Michael's family became our sanctuary. His kids, Emma, Jack, and little Sophie, they'd run into our house like it was their own, shouting, "Grandma, Grandpa," and filling our lives with noise and laughter and love. Beth would bring us homemade soup when we were sick. They'd invite us to school plays and soccer games and family dinners. That's when I knew. That's when Robert knew. That's when we made the final decisions about what would happen when he was gone. Because love isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about caring when there's nothing to gain. It's about being present in the hard moments, not just the profitable ones. Robert and I rewrote our will 3 years ago. We made arrangements. We set things in motion that none of our children knew about. And we waited. Robert's final year was both beautiful and heartbreaking. The doctors told us in January that his heart was failing. Not tomorrow, not next week, but soon. Maybe 6 months. Maybe a year if we were lucky. "How do you want to spend it?" I asked him that cold January night, both of us sitting in our bedroom, the weight of mortality pressing down on us like a heavy blanket. "With the people who actually love us," he said, "not the people who love our money." So we made a decision. We told our children that Robert was sick, that it was serious, and that we needed family more than ever. The responses told us everything. Michael took a leave of absence from teaching. He and Beth moved into our guest house so they could help with Robert's care. Emma, who was 16, learned how to check Robert's blood pressure. Jack, 14, would sit with his grandfather for hours, playing chess and listening to old war stories. Little Sophie, only 8 years old, would crawl into bed with Robert and read him her favorite books. They didn't do it for money. They did it for love. David called once a week, always with the same questions. "How's Dad feeling? Any changes to his condition? Has he been able to think clearly? Has he mentioned anything about, arrangements?" Arrangements. That's what he called planning for his father's death. Arrangements. Jennifer sent flowers once a month, expensive bouquets with cards that read, "Thinking of you," in handwriting that wasn't hers. Susan came to visit 3 times that whole year, 3 times in 12 months. Each visit lasted less than 2 hours. Each visit ended with her asking Robert for money, for her car payment, for her daughter's tuition, for her husband's business idea. And each time, Robert said no. "Susan," he told her during her last visit in September, his voice weak but firm, "I love you, but I can't keep enabling your poor decisions. I can't keep being your safety net while you refuse to learn how to fly." She left angry. She didn't call again, not until the day he died. During those final months, Robert and I had deep conversations about everything, about regret and forgiveness, about success and failure, about what we'd done right and what we'd done wrong as parents. "Did I spoil them?" he asked one evening, tears in his eyes. "Did I ruin David and Susan by giving them too much?" "No, my love," I told him, wiping his tears with my thumbs. "You gave them everything you had. What they did with it, that was their choice. You can't take responsibility for their hearts." But it hurt him. God, it hurt him so much to see what his children had become, or maybe to finally see what they'd always been. In August, Robert had another heart attack. This one was worse. We spent a week in the ICU, and the doctors said he wouldn't last much longer. His body was giving up. That's when things got really ugly. David showed up at the hospital with papers, legal documents that would give him power of attorney, medical decision-making authority, control over Robert's finances in case of incapacity. "Just a precaution, Dad," David said, his smile too bright, too eager. "We want to make sure everything is taken care of." Robert was too weak to argue, too tired to fight. But I wasn't. "Get out," I told David. "Get out of this hospital room right now." "Mother, you're being unreasonable." "I said get out!" I'd never raised my voice to my children before, not like that. The nurses came running. Security was called. It was a scene I'll never forget. Jennifer tried to smooth things over, explaining how they were just trying to help, how I was clearly overwhelmed and not thinking straight. But I saw through it. I saw through all of it. That night, after they left, Robert squeezed my hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for protecting me." "Always," I said. "I will always protect you." He survived that heart attack, but just barely. The doctors sent him home with hospice care. We had maybe weeks left, maybe days. That's when Robert asked to see Mr. Harrison, our attorney. He came to our house on a Thursday afternoon in late September. Michael and Beth gave us privacy while Robert and I met with him in our bedroom. "I want to make some final changes," Robert said. "I want to make sure Elizabeth is protected. I want to make sure the people who deserve our legacy actually get it." We spent 2 hours going over everything, every detail, every contingency, and we added something special to the will, something that would ensure the truth came out, something that would finally show David and Susan exactly what they'd become. Mr. Harrison drafted the documents. Robert signed them with a shaking hand. I signed as witness, and it was done. "They're going to be angry," Mr. Harrison warned. "They're going to contest this." "Let them try," Robert said, a small smile on his tired face. "Let them show the world exactly who they are." Robert died 3 weeks later, on a Sunday morning in October. He died peacefully, in our bed, with me holding one hand and Michael holding the other. The last thing he said to me was, "You know what to do." And I did. I knew exactly what to do. Now we're back in that lawyer's office, with me standing there holding those papers tied with a red ribbon. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. "Mother, what are you doing?" David asked, his voice strained. "Sit down, David," I said calmly. "Sit down and listen." I untied the ribbon slowly, deliberately. Inside were documents, photographs, bank statements, and letters. So many letters. Your father and I began, spent 47 years building a life together. We worked hard, we saved money, we invested wisely, but more importantly, we watched. We paid attention to what our children became. Susan shifted uncomfortably. Jennifer's expression was frozen in fake concern. "David," I said, looking directly at my oldest son, "do you remember when you graduated from law school? Your father paid for every penny of your education. $180,000. Do you remember what you said to him at your graduation party?" David's face paled. I pulled out the first photograph. It was from that party 25 years ago. I'd written the date on the back. "You told your friends," and I quote, "the old man finally did something useful. Now I can make real money." I let that sink in. "You didn't think I heard you, but I did." "That was taken out of context," David started. "Was it?" I pulled out another paper. "Here's the loan your father gave you to buy your first house. $50,000. You promised to pay it back with interest. That was 18 years ago. We've never seen a penny." Jennifer's face turned red. "We had expenses." "I'm not finished," I said, my voice steel. "Susan, your turn." My daughter looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. "Over the past 15 years, your father gave you approximately $230,000. I have the bank statements right here. Every check, every wire transfer, every emergency that you promised was the last time." I spread the statements on Mr. Harrison's desk. The boutique that failed, the car you wrecked, your husband's 3 businesses that went under, your daughter's college fund that you borrowed from and never repaid. All of it. Your father gave and gave and gave, and you took and took and took. Tears were streaming down Susan's face now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of shame, of being exposed. "And the worst part," I continued, my voice breaking slightly, "wasn't the money. Money can be replaced. What broke your father's heart, what kept him up at night during his final months, was that neither of you ever said thank you. Neither of you ever showed genuine gratitude or love or respect. That's not fair." David stood up. "Sit down," I commanded. "I'm not done." I pulled out a letter, written in Robert's own shaking handwriting. He'd written it 3 days before he died. "Your father wrote this for today. He knew you'd be here, waiting to see what you'd inherit. He knew you'd be calculating and planning and already spending money that wasn't yours yet. So he wanted me to read this to you." I unfolded the letter, my hands trembling. This was the hardest part. "My dearest David and Susan," I read aloud. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. I want you to know that I loved you with everything I had. I tried to be a good father. I tried to give you everything you needed and more. But somewhere along the way, I failed you. I failed to teach you that love isn't measured in dollars. I failed to show you that family is about more than inheritance. I failed to set boundaries when I should have. And for that, I'm sorry. But I'm not sorry for the decision I've made today. You've shown me, through your actions and your choices, that you value my money more than you value my life. You've proven that your love is conditional, transactional, and temporary. You come around when you need something and disappear when I need you. Meanwhile, your brother Michael has shown me what real family looks like. He's been there for every doctor's appointment, every bad night, every moment of fear and pain. He didn't do it for money. He did it because he loves me, because he loves your mother, because family means something to him beyond bank accounts and property deeds. So I've made my decision, and I hope someday you'll understand why." I folded the letter carefully and looked at my children. David's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Susan was sobbing quietly. Jennifer looked furious. "What decision?" David asked through gritted teeth. I nodded to Mr. Harrison. He cleared his throat and began reading from Robert's will. "I, Robert James Morrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The standard legal language followed: revocations of previous wills, appointment of executor, all the formalities. Then came the part they'd been waiting for. "To my son David Morrison, who has been given so much already, I leave the amount of $10,000 in my collection of fishing rods, in the hopes that he'll remember the days when we fished together and money didn't matter." David's face went purple. $10,000, out of an estate worth nearly $4 million. "To my daughter Susan Morrison Fletcher, who has received my financial support for many years, I leave the amount of $10,000 in my wife's china cabinet, which she always admired, in the hopes that she'll remember the family dinners we used to share before money became more important than presents." Susan gasped. "The same amount, $10,000. "To my son Michael Morrison, who has shown me the true meaning of family, who has cared for me without expectation of reward, who has been present in my life not because of what I could give him but because he genuinely loves me, I leave the remainder of my estate." The room exploded. "This is ridiculous," David shouted. "He's not even your real son. He's not your blood." And there it was, the truth they'd always felt but never said out loud. "How dare you?" I said quietly, but with such force that David actually stepped back. "How dare you say that about your brother? Robert adopted you. He gave you his name, his love, his money, his life, and you have the audacity to talk about blood?" "We'll contest this," Jennifer said, standing up. "This is undue influence." "She manipulated him." Mr. Harrison smiled calmly. "I anticipated that reaction, which is why Mr. Morrison recorded a video testimony 3 weeks before his death, with 2 independent witnesses and a medical evaluation confirming his mental competency. He explains, in detail, the reasons for his decisions. Would you like to see it?" No one answered. "Furthermore," Mr. Harrison continued, "there's a no contest clause in the will. If anyone challenges this will and loses, they forfeit even the $10,000 they were left. It all goes to charity." David and Susan looked at each other, the calculations happening behind their eyes. But I wasn't done yet. "There's one more thing," I said, picking up the last set of papers. "These are documents showing every penny your father gave you over the years. Every loan, every gift, every emergency bailout. David, your total is $243,000. Susan, yours is $230,000. I handed them each a copy. "Your father and I discussed these numbers extensively. If you were to inherit equal shares of his estate, you would be receiving far more than Michael, who received nothing over the years except love and time." "So this is about fairness?" David said bitterly. "You're punishing us?" "No," I said softly. "This is about consequences. This is about teaching you a lesson that we should have taught you decades ago, that love and family aren't transactions, that presence matters more than presence, that showing up when someone is dying is more valuable than showing up when someone's will is being read." I looked at Michael, who had tears streaming down his face, not tears of joy about the inheritance, tears of grief for the family that was fracturing before his eyes. "Michael doesn't want this," I said. "He never asked for this. But he earned it by being a son, by being present, by loving us without conditions." Susan stood up abruptly. I can't believe this. After everything, after all the years, you're choosing him over us. We're not choosing anyone, I said. You made your choices. Every time you asked for money and disappeared. Every time you skipped a visit or ignored a phone call. Every time you valued our wallet over our hearts. Those were your choices. Come on, Susan, David said, grabbing his coat. We're done here. Wait, I said. They both turned to look at me. Your father wanted me to tell you that he still loves you. That despite everything, despite his disappointment, he died loving you. And so do I. I love you both. But love doesn't mean enabling your selfishness. Love means hoping you'll learn and grow and become better people. David's expression was cold. You'll never see us again. I hope that's not true, I said, my voice breaking. I hope someday you'll understand. I hope someday you'll realize that what we gave Michael wasn't money. It was recognition for living a life of integrity and kindness, something neither of you showed us when it mattered most. They left, just walked out of that office without another word. Jennifer paused at the door, looking back at me with such hatred in her eyes that I actually felt cold. Then it was just me, Michael, Beth, and Mr. Harrison. Michael came to me and wrapped his arms around me. Mom, he whispered. Mom, I'm so sorry. Don't be, I told him, holding him tight. Don't you dare be sorry for being a good man, for being the son your father and I needed, for showing us what family really means. But David and Susan made their choices, I finished. We can't save people who don't want to be saved. We can only love them from a distance and hope they find their way. Mr. Harrison handed me a tissue. You did well, Elizabeth, he said kindly. Robert would be proud. I hope so, I said, wiping my eyes. I really hope so. Over the next few weeks, exactly what I expected happened. David hired an attorney and filed to contest the will. They claimed undue influence, mental incapacity, manipulation, every legal argument they could think of. But Robert had been thorough. The video testimony was crystal clear. He explained every decision. He showed the bank statements. He talked about the years of being used, of being treated like an ATM instead of a father. He was articulate, clear-minded, and absolutely certain. The case was dismissed within 2 months. David and Susan were given the choice to accept their $10,000 or continue fighting and lose everything. They took the money, both of them, cashed the checks within a week. I haven't heard from either of them in 8 months now. My grandchildren from David and Susan, I don't know them. They're strangers to me, and that breaks my heart in ways I can't fully express. But I have Michael's family. I have Emma, Jack, and Sophie, who come over every Sunday for dinner. I have Beth, who calls me every morning to check on me. I have a family that loves me for who I am, not for what I have. Robert's estate was settled. Michael used some of the money to pay off his house and set up college funds for his kids. He donated $200,000 to the hospital where Robert died to fund heart disease research. The rest he invested wisely, planning for his family's future. He tried to give me half. Mom, he said, this is too much. You should have this. I have everything I need, I told him. Your father wanted you to have it. Not because you're his favorite, but because you earned it by being faithful. So here I am, 8 months later, sitting in my living room, thinking about everything that's happened. At 87 years old, I've lived through a lot. I've seen war and peace, poverty and prosperity, love and loss. But this past year has taught me things I didn't expect to learn. I learned that you can love someone deeply and still set boundaries. I love David and Susan with all my heart. They're my children. I carried them, raised them, sacrificed for them. But loving them doesn't mean enabling their worst behaviors. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. I learned that family isn't always about blood. Michael wasn't Robert's biological son, but he was more of a son than many biological children ever are. He showed up, he cared, he loved without conditions. And that's what family really is. People who choose to be there, who choose to love you, who choose to stay when things get hard. I learned that regret is heavy, but truth is freeing. I sometimes wonder if Robert and I should have set boundaries earlier, should have said no more often, should have taught David and Susan these lessons when they were younger. But we did the best we could with what we knew. And in the end, we told the truth. We showed them what their actions had cost them. That had to be enough. I learned that grief and disappointment can exist side by side. I grieve for Robert every single day. I miss his laugh, his wisdom, his presence in my life. But I'm also disappointed in the children I raised. I'm disappointed that they couldn't see past money to the real treasure, time with their father before he died. Those moments they missed can never be recovered. That relationship can never be rebuilt. I learned that money reveals character. It doesn't create character. It reveals what was always there. When Robert's will was read, David and Susan showed exactly who they'd always been. Maybe I'd refused to see it before. Maybe I'd made excuses. But that day, the masks came off. I learned that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. Standing there in that lawyer's office, watching my children's faces contort with rage and disappointment, that hurt. It still hurts. But I know Robert and I made the right decision. We protected Michael's integrity. We taught a lesson that needed teaching. We stood up for our values, even when it cost us relationships. And most importantly, I learned that you can't take your money with you, but you can choose what it does after you're gone. Robert's money went to someone who will use it wisely, who will honor his memory, who will teach his children about generosity and kindness, and showing up for the people you love. If I could give advice to anyone listening to this story, it would be this. Don't wait until the will reading to show people who you really are. Don't let your relationship with your parents be defined by what you expect to inherit. Visit them, call them, sit with them, love them while they're alive, not just when you're reading about them in an obituary. And if you're a parent like me, don't be afraid to set boundaries. Don't enable selfishness in the name of love. Teach your children that family is about more than transactions. Show them what real love looks like by being present, by being honest, by being willing to make hard decisions. I think about Robert every single day. I wonder what he'd say about how everything turned out. But I think I know. I think he'd be proud that we stood our ground. I think he'd be happy that Michael's family is thriving. I think he'd be sad about David and Susan, but at peace, knowing we did everything we could. Sometimes, late at night, I look at that photograph from our wedding day. Robert and me, so young and hopeful, with no idea what the next 47 years would bring. We looked so innocent, so ready to conquer the world together, and we did, in our own way. We built a life. We raised children. We made mistakes and learned lessons and loved each other through it all. The house is quieter now without Robert. The bed feels too big. The mornings are too long, but I'm not alone. Michael stops by almost every day. The grandchildren fill the house with laughter on Sundays. Beth brings me soup and sits with me and tells me stories about her day. This is family. This is what Robert and I fought for. This is what that will reading was really about, protecting the people who chose to love us and teaching lessons to those who chose differently. I don't know how much time I have left in this world. Could be months, could be years. But however long it is, I'm going to spend it with people who love me for who I am, not for what I have, not for what I can give them, but for me. And when my time comes, when I take my last breath and close my eyes for the final time, I want to do it knowing I stood for something, that I protected the people who deserved protecting, that I told the truth even when it hurt, that while reading shocked everyone. What I did, standing up and speaking truth, changed everything. Some people think I was cruel. Some think I was justified. But I know in my heart that I did exactly what Robert and I agreed to do. We honored the people who honored us. We protected integrity. We taught a lesson about love and family and what really matters. And if David and Susan ever decide to come back, if they ever learn and grow and understand what we were trying to teach them, I'll be here. The door is always open. Forgiveness is always possible. But I won't apologize for standing up for what's right. I won't apologize for protecting Michael. I won't apologize for honoring my husband's wishes. Because at 87 years old, I've learned that living with integrity is more important than keeping everyone happy. That truth matters more than comfort. That love sometimes means letting people walk away so they can find their own way back. That will reading was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the rightest thing I've ever done. And I'd do it again, every single time. Because that's what love really is. Not enabling, not indulging, not pretending everything is fine when it's not. Real love is honest. Real love sets boundaries. Real love teaches lessons. Real love protects the people who deserve protection. And real love knows when to stand up and shock everyone in the room by telling the truth. That's my story, dear friends. That's what happened at my husband's will reading. That's what I did that shocked everyone. I told the truth, and I've never been more at peace.